Who is the best NFL running back today? Today I rank the top 32 NFL running backs from 32 to 1. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and like this video for more NFL content. And without further ado, let's get right into the rankings. At number 32, I have Rashaad Penny. Now, Rashaad Penny is an interesting one because he is technically part of kind of a crew with Chris Carson there in Seattle. But I think Rashaad Penny has really elevated his stock last season. He had the best statistical season of his career, and I think his ability to kind of create production in yards after contact really stepped out to me, I guess, last season, and it showed itself more. He was first in the league in breakaway percentage. He was great after contact. He was overall looked pretty elusive and fast, and he's got a fairly strong build. He's not obviously one of the strongest power backs, and I don't think he can necessarily carry a run game by himself the way some of the upper echelon running backs can, but I certainly saw a lot of progress in his game and enough to warrant a spot on this list. At number 31, I have Ramondre Stevenson. I think the trick with Stevenson is power. He's extremely strong. He's a freak. He's extremely strong. He can kind of sledgehammer defensive linemen, and was a really big feature to the Patriots' run game last year, which was such a big part of their offense and kind of created some of the success they had at times in the passing game. He gives defenses different things to look at as opposed to Harris. I think Harris is a faster, more twitchy and elusive back, whereas Stevenson, more up the middle for him. He's very good at forcing tackles. He's pretty good after contact too, and overall he had a fairly productive season last year, and I think his emergence was enough to warrant a top 32 spot at number 31. At number 30, I have A.J. Dillon, another massive power back of the Green Bay Packers. I think we saw more utilization of A.J. Dillon last year in the Green Bay offense as kind of that change of pace in a weird way to Aaron Jones, who entered the year as one of the best backs in the league, considered at least. Dillon kind of did just about as well as Jones did on a productivity-wise basis. He certainly is very powerful and strong. His just muscles jump out to you. But I think he has more speed than one would think. I have seen him, I guess, make more plays that are kind of explosive that you wouldn't expect for someone that's so big. But he's able to do it. He's strong. Again, that's the thing with him. Doesn't offer much as a receiver, which is kind of why he's lower here. And he isn't a committee. He isn't kind of that number one guy, so he isn't getting as much attention. But I think A.J. Dillon, after last season, really upped his stock. Another guy that upped his stock and certainly cemented himself into the top 32. At 29 is a man that hasn't really played in the last year or so, but from the past we know can be very good, and that is Raheem Mostert, the new Miami Dolphins running back, who the name with him is just speed. I mean, he is fast. And it's not so much, he'll give you quick little bursts here and there, but at any given moment, he's one of those guys that can just take it 70, and you're not even overly surprised. Now, I am a little concerned on if he was a product of Kyle Shanahan and that kind of run zone blocking scheme that him and his dad perfected, but he is going to Miami with Mike McDaniel, who is a practitioner and a disciple of Kyle Shanahan. So I would expect some of the same stuff that he succeeded with in San Francisco to be used. Now, the thing with Mostert, not a huge receiver, not overly powerful, but it's speed with him. And in that kind of role, he can be more than capable. So at number 29, I have Raheem Mostert. At number 28 is someone I did not expect to see on this list last season, but he really improved last season. You got to give it to him. It's Devin Singletary of the Buffalo Bills. Devin Singletary had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage last year. He had a fairly efficient year. He was part of a actually very successful Bills run game. And I think as kind of a compliment to the power of Josh Allen, he has a little bit more speed now. He, on top of that, is also pretty strong and is able to force missed tackles and produce after contact. I think his ability to make explosive plays can also go a little underrated. I think I've seen him do that more than one would think. So overall, Devin Singletary, I think, is a complementary part of a successful offense and rushing offense, and definitely improved last year enough to crack my top 32. At number 27, I have Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders has always been interesting to me because I think he's very talented. I think he's elusive. I think he's fast. I think he has more power to his game now as he's kind of aged. And I've always thought he was at least a capable receiving back. But for whatever reason, the best rush offense in the league last year didn't feature him overly. I mean, he touched the ball 163 times. That's not among the most in the league. He's always been productive, and he's always been effective, and he was effective last year in limited action, but it's always been a question to me why they don't feature him more. And so that's something that's kind of wearing on me is there something to Miles Sanders? Can he not tolerate some of the workload that some of the better backs in the league can? And that's something that I think knocks him down a bit for me. But I like mostly everything to his game, and he has the efficiency production, at least, in limited action to show that he's an effective running back. So at number 27, I have Miles Sanders. At number 26, I have Tony Pollard. There have been moments over the last 2 seasons where I felt Tony Pollard was the most effective and impactful running back on the Dallas Cowboys, and considering they have Ezekiel Elliott, that's a real thing. And part of that is Zeke's decline, but part of that is Tony Pollard is one of the best complementary backs in football. And look, does the offensive line and the scheme and not having to, fully take on the load help him? Certainly. But he's pretty elusive, he's pretty fast, and he's decent in the passing game as well as a receiver. I think that's an underrated element to his game. So he certainly has talent, and it's certainly been utilized over the last couple seasons. I'm excited to see what he can do and what I think will be a bigger role in 2022. At number 25, one of the surprising storylines of the league last year was Cordarrelle Patterson's emergence from seemingly nowhere. He had been just kind of a lesser-used receiver and special teams player on previous teams, but in Atlanta, he found a home as a true running back. And I think what we saw with Patterson was a player that early in the season contributed in 2 facets of the game. He was a fairly ineffective but inspiring runner with some sneaky elusiveness and power. And as a receiver, he really did his damage alongside Kyle Pitts. Without Atlanta having a true number 1 or maybe even number 2 receiver, Patterson kind of had to step into that role, and he did for most of the season last year at a fairly proficient level. Now, I think Cordarrelle Patterson, to say he'll have as much success this year is bold, because I do think last year was a bit of a flash in the pan, and I do think him being in Arthur Smith's system helps him a bit, because we've seen Arthur Smith have success with running backs before. Look what he did with Derrick Henry. So that's certainly a factor there, but I think you've got to give Cordarrelle Patterson credit for playing behind one of the weaker run-blocking offensive lines last season. Not a bad one, but not a great one, and still having a decent amount of success and contributing in multiple facets of the game. At number 24, I have James Robinson of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, James Robinson would have had to split time with Travis Etienne, but Etienne's obviously hurt now, so it's just going to be Robinson, which works to a pretty decent effect in 2020. And even last year on a terrible Jags team, had a pretty good year. He was just south of 5 yards a carry, nearly 1,000 yards from scrimmage. And I think with James Robinson, it's really only the receiving ability that leaves something to be desired. I think he's elusive and powerful, and I think he is pretty fast too. So I think he can be used in kind of multiple different ways, and I have seen him carry the load, which is giving him kind of a boost over a couple of the other guys below him that maybe haven't proven that. And he's done it with pretty abhorrent offensive lines and overall offensive schemes, which is even more impressive. So is he necessarily a game-changing running back? No, definitely not. But he is certainly a starting caliber player, coming in for me at number 24. At number 23, I have Melvin Gordon of the Denver Broncos. Now, Gordon, of course, has to split time with Javonte Williams, who kind of took his role as number one back last season. But I really think Gordon's been getting kind of a rejuvenation over the last couple of years. You remember his last year in LA wasn't necessarily the prettiest, but he's looked better the last couple of years, especially last year. Pretty productive year. And there's, to his game, really, he hasn't really shown the ability to be an elite receiver, you could say, in recent years, but he's been at least capable there. And his ability really to force tackles, his powerfulness, I guess, and he's really good in terms of just cranking out run after run. It'll go 8-yard run, 13-yard run, 6-yard run, 15-yard run, just really consistent with him. He does have sometimes fumble issues, but it's really consistent yardage with him. Maybe not as much in terms of just 50-yard rushes or 30-yard rushes, explosive plays, but there's a lot of consistent yardage with him, which is something that I certainly respect about him. So coming in at number 23, I have Melvin Gordon. At number 22 is a man who we saw a surprise career revival from, and that is James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. James Conner, after a decent year with Pittsburgh and then several just off years where he wasn't even competent at the running back position, looked pretty good last year. Now, he wasn't overly effective on a per carry basis, but he looked improved in the receiving game. He was able to finish a lot of drives for the Cardinals at the goal line, and he looked pretty powerful and explosive after contact, and overall being able to kind of shake off defenders, and looked a little faster than I think he has in the past. Maybe that has something to do with his health. I'm not sure. Maybe he was healthier last year than in years past, but it was behind an offensive line that was decent, but nothing to write home about, and he was still able to perform. Now, do I think that'll necessarily continue to that extent last year, as in, do I think he'll have 18 total touchdowns again? Probably not, but you've got to give him his respect for that, and that's why he comes in at number 22 on my rankings. At number 21, I have Antonio Gibson. Kind of the same deal with Melvin Gordon in that I feel like with Gibson, there's not a ton of explosiveness, but there's a lot of consistency and just consistent churning out of 8-yard runs and 12-yard runs and 9-yard runs and 15-yard runs, but not a lot of 35-yard runs or 55-yard runs. It's really consistent with him. He's powerful and can be explosive at times in that way. I also think he, at this point, is probably even a better receiver than Melvin Gordon is, at least statistically he was last season. So I do think Antonio Gibson, at a younger age as well, passes Melvin Gordon in that aspect of his game. But with him, he was a guy that I thought I could potentially put in the top 10 after last season, and he kind of disappointed when it came to that. So that is why I'm a little bit down on him, but still had a respectable season at number 21. At number 20, I have Elijah Mitchell of the San Francisco 49ers. We saw Elijah Mitchell move right in to that Raheem Mostert role and fill it just about as well as Mostert ever did, if not better. He was over 1,000 yards from scrimmage last year, just south of 5 yards a carry, and placed very well in some of the advanced metrics. He to me, doesn't have some of the rushing upside that Mostert does, in that he doesn't have the 51-yard or 34-yard carries necessarily. But he has shown that in spades, I guess, at times. It's not as consistent, but it is there to his game. But I think there's more consistency with just overall his rushes in general. Like, I think we see more 10-yard, 12-yard, 8-yard, 15-yard, 17-yard gains from Elijah Mitchell than we see from Raheem Mostert, which makes him overall the more effective running back for the Niners system. And overall, I think Eli Mitchell last season, for what he was able to do, warrants a spot in my top 20. At number 19, I have Damien Harris, of whom is a player that has always intrigued me due to his consistently high placement in the advanced metrics. Now, I think Damien Harris kind of showed what he is last year. He's a player that can finish drives off at the goal line. He's a player that can be elusive. He's a player that can produce consistent yardage. He's a player that is pretty powerful. He's a player that is not a very good receiver. And he is overall a player that can be the number one back of an effective backfield, but he's going to need some other guys to spell him, as we saw with Stevenson. And I think that's kind of what he'll be. I mean, I don't really see him elevating to an elite level. I just don't know if he has that level of talent. But I think we saw a lot from him to warrant saying he's certainly a good, maybe just short of a very good running back, but certainly a very capable one, and certainly an above-average starter for the New England Patriots, and someone that was very critical to their offensive success last season. At number 18, I have Javonte Williams, someone that showed us multiple ways of impact last season from the running back position and fully established himself as the number one for the Denver Broncos. He had a lot of success as a rusher, but he also had some success as a receiver, and I value that. I think he showed us a lot of elusivity and the ability to kind of break away and run to the outside, but also run in between the guards and in between the tackles. And overall, I think he can be effective in multiple different situations and areas, and is someone that was able to carry the load for Denver last season for the most part. Obviously, he had Gordon spelling him at times, but he was the guy for Denver, and he produced and formed an actually pretty productive rush offense last season. I'm excited to see what he can do with Russell Wilson this year as that dynamic. I'm interested to see how that unfolds. And overall, I'm excited to see how he improves in his second year following a strong rookie campaign. At number 17, I have David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears, somebody whose efficiency definitely took a dip, but I'm wondering if that can be chalked up to his circumstances also taking a dip, and overall the Bears offense being really anemic and just really poor, and him being in and out of the lineup at times as well last season. I still think David Montgomery has all the tools to be a top 10 running back. I really do. He just kind of needs to put the production together at this point over a multiple season stretch. He had a good year last year relative to some of these other guys, and he has shown he can take the load. But I don't think he necessarily improved in the way I could have hoped, and that's why he kind of fell for me this season to number 17. But still a very good running back, capable of being in the top 15 on any given season. At number 16, I have Josh Jacobs, another player who fits the molds of inefficient power back who fills other roles. Jacobs is improving as a receiver. He's still not great, but he's getting better. He's not very elusive. He's not overly fast, but he's very strong, and that helps him after contact. That helps him with forcing tackles. He's not, again, efficient on a per touch or a per carry basis, but he is consistently churning out yardage year by year, and not as consistently, but still fairly consistently game by game. So that deserves respect. His offensive line's gotten worse over the past couple years, and he's still been able to be somewhat productive, so that deserves some respect. And I expect with Josh McDaniels coming in, him to improve. So Josh Jacobs is 16, but probably going to move up He certainly has more upside than just a 16th ranking would show, but for now, he ranks 16th on my list. At number 15 is a player that might be going in the wrong way, and that is Ezekiel Elliott. Elliott has clearly taken multiple steps down from his best running back in the league form over his first 3 seasons. Now look, he's still been productive, he's still been effective, and he's still a good player, but he's not great. And that's hurting Dallas's offense because they still sometimes rely on him to be great, and he just doesn't do that with any sort of consistency anymore. I think Zeke, he can be a little careless with the ball. The fumbles have been somewhat of an issue. His efficiency's taken hit. He's not a great receiver. He's never been a great receiver. And even some of the speed and elusiveness he used to have early in his career has left him. So he's still powerful, he's still strong, and he's still able to churn out yardage on a consistent basis, but it's not as efficient as it used to be, and it's not as effective as it used to be, and he's just overall not as good of a player as he used to be. He's still one of the 15 best running backs in the league, I believe, but I don't know, man. After next year, I don't know if I'll even be saying that about him anymore. So I think he's certainly going on the down slope, but still a productive player who has a lot of talent. So at number 15, I have Ezekiel Elliott. At number 14, I have DAndre Swift, who is a player that possesses multiple traits that are among the top of the league. He's one of the best receiving backs in the league, I would say. He is very good with his vision, and overall, I think his kind of ability to bounce to the outside is impressive. He's not a great in-between the tackles runner on a per-carry basis, which is why his efficiency is pretty low. And he did kind of farm a couple of his impressive yardage totals towards the ends of games in garbage time when the Lions were already lost the game. But what he did last year was impressive, specifically later in the year. And I find him to be a player that behind what I believe a very good offensive line in the Detroit Lions is going to improve next season. So at number 14, I have DAndre Swift. At number 13, Saquon Barkley. He is one of the most complete running backs in the league. It took me a while to say it, but he is. Really talented. We know this. Has everything. We know this. I mean, he can catch out of the backfield. He's powerful. He's really strong. He's fast. Not a lot to his game that really has me concerned just as an overall talented player. Like, he's one of the most talented backs, if not the most talented back in the league, and has shown it on numerous occasions. It's health with him, and that's taken a toll on him over the last 2 years. He's not been efficient. He has been more hesitant. There has not been as many big plays. There has been more negative plays. There has been, more fumbles. He's overall just been a much less effective rusher behind what has always been a bad offensive line. They've always had a bad offensive line in New York. It's just hurting him more now because he's been hurt. And that's the one thing I want to see from Saquon this year. If he's able to be healthy, how is he able to perform under a new scheme with Brian Daboll, someone who kind of revived Devin Singletary's career last season and has had a lot of success overall with the Buffalo run game at times, did last season. I'm interested to see what he's able to do with Saquon Barkley, because I know when Saquon Barkley is right and is healthy, he can be one of the best running backs in the league. I still think he has that ability, but we just have to see it, which is why I hold off from putting him in the top 10. So number 13, I have Saquon Barkley. At number 12, I have Kareem Hunt of the Cleveland Browns. Now, Kareem Hunt did miss some time last season, but overall with him, I don't think he's quite 2017 Kareem Hunt, but I think he's very good. I still think he's very effective. I think he's very good as a complementary piece to Nick Chubb, kind of as a change of pace guy. I do think some of his speed's gone from him a little bit, but he's still very fast, still very elusive, and overall is just a very effective runner. I do also think, though, his receiving ability is gone. And those are a couple of things that have just kind of taken him out of the top 10 for me, but he still has more than enough ability to crack the top 12, and his production, when he's actually been on the field, has been very good, but availability is a bit of a concern for him as well. So overall, number 12, I have Kareem Hunt. At number 11, I have Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. I definitely think Aaron Jones took a step down last year from where he had been, but he still was very good, and he still affected the game in multiple ways, not only with his rushing ability, but his receiving ability as well was there. The advanced stats were still very good for him. He still had a very good year. I just was a little bit disappointed overall with sometimes his impact in some of the games. So that kind of fell for me, and that's why he kind of fell out of the top 10 for me. But he still had a very good year, and is still an integral piece to the Packers offense and their run game. He doesn't really have a ton of holes, but I don't know if necessarily there's something that really is awesome with him. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess. He's not great at anything, but he excels in a good way towards everything. So Aaron Jones, safely a top 12 guy, arguably top 10. Just missed that top 10 for me. At number 10, entering the top 10, I have Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Najee Harris really showed his ability as a receiver last year, and he showed his kind of improved, powerful nature. Now, he's certainly, I wouldn't say the fastest back. I think he's a little faster than some think, but not overly fast, and his efficiency lacked last season, but I do think that was partly due to a poor offensive line. And again, he adds a ton as a receiver to the point that you can kind of almost build your offense around it. I am interested to see how he does with worse quarterback play and maybe even an increased load this year, even opposed to last season. But he played pretty well last season and fairly consistently, and his offense was really relying upon him among all the guys they had last year to generate yards and points, and I give him extra points for that. So at number 10, I have Najee Harris. At number 9, I've got Leonard Fournette of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. With Fournette, even though he kind of splits carries in a committee of sorts there, he's clearly their best back, and he was pretty efficient last year, had an impact in the passing game, and it seems like this guy almost always in big games performs and makes an impact and has a big play or has a key touchdown, and we've seen it over 2 years now. He's been very good for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's an impact maker. Again, he's powerful, but he's also quick and fast, I would say, at least a little bit underrated at that. And he's not a terrible receiver. He was in 2020, but I thought last year he really improved at that, and just overall making kind of those option route catches or, as a short route runner, I thought he improved last season. So Leonard Fournette, certainly a player that even, a couple years now, I think this is his 6th year into the league now, has shown strides in his game and might only be getting better. Maybe be rediscovering a new prime. Obviously, he hit that, he had a couple great seasons in Jacksonville, but might be hitting a new prime in Tampa Bay. So stay tuned for that. I think he's one of the 10 best backs in the league at number 9. At number 8, I have Austin Ekeler, who has been getting a lot more respect recently, and I think it's because of his surge in rushing production. He's always been one of the best receiving backs in the NFL and remains so today. His ability to thrive in really multiple different receiving concepts is something that really impresses me and has impressed me for 5 years. But I think his overall rushing ability has improved. He has pretty good vision. He has I just think improved overall as a runner, and he's become more consistent and more effective. And he's becoming a bigger part of the Chargers offense as Justin Herbert improves and gets better in the passing game and kind of dispel the passing game with his runs. So I think Austin Ekeler is someone that is improving and someone that is surging right now in value and comes in at number 8 on my running back rankings. The number 7 spot is where we start moving into the creme of the creme, and Joe Mixon is taking that spot. I think Joe Mixon has been always extremely talented and continues to be. Great vision, fast, pretty powerful, not overly powerful, but I think kind of underrated powerful and surprisingly and deceptively elusive, good after contacts. Not a ton of flaws to his game other than durability, really. His efficiency is lacked, but he's behind one of the worst offensive lines in the league, and he adds value as a receiver. He does a lot, and he takes over games, and you can feel his impact on games, and he is kind of a forgotten part of that Bengals offense, in my opinion. You know, everyone looks at Burrow and Chase, and even Higgins, I think, at this point, more than they look at Mixon, but he was a big part of that offense last year. He was very good for them. Excited to see what he does this year behind what will certainly be the best offensive line that he's had and what I think could be the best offense that he's ever had and probably will ever have. At number 6, I have Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. We've been seeing Alvin Kamara produce at an elite level for 5 years now. He's one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. He's one of the best now rushers in the league. He's always been elite. And, you know, save for the legal issues, is in the absolute prime of his career. And with Drew Brees, without Drew Brees, has shown to produce. We'll see what he's able to do without Sean Payton. But he's really shifty. He's powerful, I think, more than he gets credit for. Again, one of the best receivers in the league. Last year was not quite the best year of his career, but it was probably with the worst support of his career, so it is somewhat to be expected. And he was still very dangerous and was the number one guy on that offense. So at number 6, I have Alvin Kamara. At number 5, I have Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns. Again, we're getting into elite territory here. Nick Chubb's been elite really ever since coming into the league, certainly over the last 3 years. He's powerful, he's fast, he's extremely efficient, he's great at forcing missed tackles. He's pretty healthy for the most part. He has a great offensive line, but he elevates that offensive line as well. Not much as a receiver, but for all he's able to do and for all he means to that Browns offense, he is absolutely one of the 5 best backs in the league. And you could argue for him to be even higher than number 5. So at number 5, I have my Georgia boy, Nick Chubb. At number 4, I have Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings. We know the story with Dalvin Cook. When he's on the field, which is most of the time, but not always, absolute unstoppable animal. He is just amazing. He is the key to the Vikings offense. He's what sets up that play-action game that's been pretty successful for them over the past few years. And he's the tone setter. He is the key to that offense. He's very powerful. He's elusive. He's fast. He's a decent receiver. He's not great. That's maybe the flaw in his game. But really outside of that, he's a pretty flawless player that has been extremely productive over the years. Last year, again, wasn't his best year, but still a very good season from Dalvin Cook. Good enough to come in at number 4 on my top 32 running backs list. At number 3, the 3rd best running back in the NFL, according to me, is Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey, when he was healthy, when he was last fully healthy in 2019, was the best running back in the league. And I still think he has that ability, similar to Saquon. And now I've seen more from him than Saquon, but his production's been a little disappointing too over the last couple of years. Now, he's the best receiving back in the league. That's certainly something. He's pretty powerful, pretty strong, and very elusive, very fast, very quick, very good vision. Not many flaws to his game, and you could argue when healthy, again, he's the best back in the league. I had him as such last season, but I don't see him quite there anymore simply because he's missed too much time and because I think a couple guys had a couple insane seasons and they've passed him up. But an outstanding season in 2019 from Christian McCaffrey. And I don't want it to be forgotten because he was truly amazing. I think he had 1,000 yards receiving and rushing. Still, when he's healthy, maybe the best in the league. And if he comes back and he's healthy and he was the best back in the league this season, would not be shocked. But as of right now, I have him at number 3. At number 2, I have Derrick Henry. When healthy, again, easily can argue he's the best back in the league. Not much of a receiver, but just so powerful, so strong, and so important to that Titans offense that really struggled to function without him. He was, of course, the key, and we saw when he came back in the playoff game, wasn't himself. They mostly stalled for almost the entire game. Derrick Henry, the stress he puts on defenses, he's one of the best that we've seen at the running back position when it comes to, you can still even use him when you're trailing in a game, as we've seen. The stress he puts on defenses is really unlike any running back in the league. The only questions I have about him at this point is, of course, he's not a receiver, but he hasn't been really. It hasn't really mattered. But the real things with him is, how is he going to look after the injury? And he's had a couple years in the league now. He's had a lot of wear and tear. How will he look next season? I think that's still a little bit of a concern. And I don't think there's much to any concern with number 1, which is ultimately why I have Henry at 2. But you can certainly argue Henry's number 1. And when healthy, I may even agree with you. So at number 2, I have Derrick Henry. I think as of today, the best running back in football is Jonathan Taylor. I think he is the most impactful on a per-play basis. I think he is just the most productive over the last year, and overall just is the greatest back in the league. He is ridiculously strong. He's fast. And I think the underrated thing with him is his receiving ability. He's not a great receiver, obviously, but he's a solid to solid plus receiver. He's not to the point of Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry irrelevance in that aspect, which is what I think puts him a little bit above those guys. He matches them 100% with the powerfulness and at times the explosiveness and the efficiency despite that, and despite taking a lot of the carries, as Taylor took a ton last year. But I think he does more in the receiving game, and he's extremely, just like Henry, he is extremely relied upon within his offense. The Colts were really just Jonathan Taylor-centric last year offensively, and were actually a pretty solid unit with Taylor as the primary option offensively, showing that he still can be valuable to a quality offense. I think the thing with Taylor, or the one thing I want to see him do more that Henry maybe has done, is maybe be more of a factor when the Colts are trailing. But I think there's elements that Taylor does that are better than Henry. I trust his trajectory going up more than Henry's right now. And overall, I just think he does more in the receiving game as well. So at number 1, I believe the best back in the NFL as of today is Jonathan Taylor.